Hey everyone, and welcome back to another box office breakdown. I like to make these sort of videos whenever I think something interesting is going on in the box office, and man, I gotta say, this weekend was pretty surprising. I'm gonna cover a few topics today. I'm gonna cover Avatar: The Way of Water's continued success, M3GAN's huge surprise at the box office, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, A Man Called Otto, and then a few last quick hitters. There's a lot to cover today, so let me go ahead and get right into it with the top 5. So this week in the top 5, we had Avatar: The Way of Water at number 1 with $45 million, M3GAN at the 2 spot with $30.2 million, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish at $13.12, A Man Called Otto with $4.2 million on only 637 screens, and then Black Panther: Wakanda Forever in its 9th week making $3.3 million. And right away, I gotta say, I just in general am surprised at the success of this week. This is the first weekend since July where 2 movies made over $20 million. Think about that. That's insane. In any typical year, you can expect at least 2 movies to make over $20 million whenever it comes to Christmas or Thanksgiving, but not this year. Or should I say last year? Sorry, I still got 2022 on the brain. But I think that this is a great indication of where we're going to go with the box office in 2023. If we can start off the first weekend of the year in January with this sort of return, then sky's the limit from here. Usually in January, there aren't many good movies that come out because you're coming out of the holidays, people aren't spending as much money, so they'll just dump a movie in January just so people forget about it and they release it and it's done. But man, for there to be this big of a surprise weekend already, I'm very excited with what we can see in the future. But let's get into the specific movies and their returns, my takeaways from it with Avatar: The Way of Water. Avatar: The Way of Water continues to dominate the box office. It only dropped 33% weekend over weekend. It made $45 million. In its 4th week, too. This movie is an absolute juggernaut. If you weren't aware already, this movie is the biggest movie released in 2022 at $1.7 billion worldwide. I made a video about it earlier in the week, but since that time, it has passed up Top Gun: Maverick in the worldwide box office. I don't think it's quite there whenever it comes to the domestic total, but worldwide, Avatar is the biggest movie of 2022. And now with $1.7 billion, it is the 7th highest grossing film of all time. You guys, it's only in its 4th week. That's absolutely insane. And I'm very excited for the movie. I think that it's well deserved. I really enjoyed it. I went and saw it twice. James Cameron worked 13 years on getting this movie made, and now he's reaping all the rewards. There were some false reports out there saying that James Cameron said that it needed to make over $2 billion in the box office, which simply isn't true. He did say it needed to be one of the highest grossing films of all time, which obviously this movie cost anywhere between $350 million to $430 million, I think, to produce, and then that doesn't include marketing, theaters get a cut in there, there's some, costs that I'm sure we aren't aware of that the studio had, but surely at $1.7 billion, this thing has turned a profit at this point. And you know what? Its biggest competition was going to be M3GAN here in the first week, given that movie's great critical and audience reception, and the fact that it's able to beat it out now in its 4th weekend, I don't see anything standing a chance against Way of Water here for the next several weeks. So this is going to continue to dominate the box office. I'm probably going to be sitting here this time next week talking about it being number 1 in its 5th week, something ridiculous like that. But that's everything I got to say about The Way of Water. All in all, this movie's a huge, massive success. But I really want to talk about what M3GAN was able to accomplish in its first weekend. M3GAN defied all of my expectations this week, gaining $30 million in the domestic box office off of a budget of only $12 million. And that's ahead of Smile's debut of $22 million, The Black Phone's $24 million, with those films going on to gain $216 and a little over $160 million worldwide, respectively. And this is a huge surprise for me. I didn't even know if this movie was going to make $20 million in the box office because its trailers were a little weird. Everyone that I talked to wasn't quite sure about this movie, but it is proven that through word of mouth that people went out to the cinema to go see this thing. It has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes and an even more impressive 72 score on Metacritic. For those of you that don't know the difference, Rotten Tomatoes gets its score from the percentage of positive reviews. So everyone could like a movie, give it a 70%. It's not the best movie of the year, but if most people gave it like a 70, then it's going to have a 94%. But Metacritic is an actual score. And it's traditionally hard to get a pretty good score on Metacritic, and 72, while it doesn't sound pretty, is fantastic for this film. So with it already outpacing last year's horror successes in The Black Phone and Smile, nothing coming out in the next few weeks and really only having to compete with Avatar: The Way of Water, this movie's going to continue to rack up a ton of money off of a very low production budget. Who knows? The sky's the limit. If Smile can go on to gain over $200 million, who knows what M3GAN can get? And this just goes to show that producers James Wan and Jason Blum are continuing to revolutionize the horror game out there. They are showing people that you don't need an old franchise in order to make money in the horror genre. In fact, you can go with something completely new and it will do better than the old genres that people continue to recycle through. And just last year, we can look at the quality of film produced with the Texas Chainsaw sequel as well as Halloween Ends. People hated those movies for the most part. I know some people liked Halloween Ends, but it seems like everyone hated Texas Chainsaw Massacre. With the quality of those films going down and these films apparently doing so well and people responding to that, I think we can expect even more new horror. But that's not to say that we're not going to get a M3GAN sequel. We are almost absolutely getting a sequel sooner rather than later. I bet they already have screenwriters working on this thing now. So yeah, M3GAN is a huge success. It's going to make a ton of money. If you haven't seen it already, I really liked the movie. I made a review and put it out a few days ago. If you haven't seen it, go out and support this film. I think you're gonna enjoy it. Now, transitioning over to another movie that I think has pretty good legs, let's talk about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. The Last Wish had only a 22% drop weekend over weekend and racked in $13 million this week, making it number 3 in the box office. And I was looking at the budget for this film and it was surprisingly low for an animated movie. It was still $90 million, but that's really not as bad as I thought it was going to be, and so far worldwide they have almost $200 million, so I would imagine that they're pretty close to producing a profit. And you know they're selling a lot of merchandise from the Puss in Boots character, so they've probably already made a profit just from that. And it's in its 3rd week, it hasn't dropped too much, and similar to M3GAN and Avatar, there's really nothing else coming out here in the next few weeks, or at least nothing for kids, so I would imagine this movie's going to continue to do well weekend over weekend. It's not going to make a ton of money, but you know, 10 million here, 5 million there, it's going to continue racking it up. And it kind of reminds me of that movie Sing that came out in 2016. It didn't get released to a ton of money, but it just kept racking in money weekend over weekend. It wasn't huge returns, but that movie made a quiet $600 million. I don't think this movie's going to make $600 million, but you know what? It has really good positive word of mouth, so parents are going to continue to take their kids to go see this. Maybe people that don't have kids will go with their friends to go see it after they've already seen Avatar and M3GAN. And it's got me thinking, with the critical and box office success of this film, are we going to see Shrek in not too long? Because let's face it, we haven't seen Shrek in a major motion picture in over 10 years. People miss that franchise. So if they can come back with this Puss in Boots movie and have it be as good as it is and make this sort of financial return, then I think it opens up the door to a Shrek 5. Next, I want to talk about Tom Hanks' new movie, A Man Called Otto. This movie had a very, very limited release last weekend at just 4 theaters across the country, and it expanded to just over 630 theaters this week, so I wasn't expecting to see a huge return. But you know what? It did pretty solid. It made just over $4 million and was 4th place this weekend in the box office. And it's expanding to more theaters next week, so I would imagine that it's going to hold steady at this position or maybe even go up to the 3rd slot next weekend. This movie also had the 3rd best per screen average of the top 5 in the box office this week at just below $6,600 per screen. Now, it was produced for a budget of $50 million. So far, it's made $12 million, but you have to keep in mind it hasn't been in very many theaters across the country. I think the expansion next weekend is going to help, and it seems like people enjoyed the movie, so I would imagine over time this movie is going to turn a profit, and I'm just happy that Tom Hanks has a winner here. Because last year, for him personally in his roles, I think it was a bit of an off year. He had that movie Pinocchio come out, which was seemingly on everyone's worst list. And then he was in Elvis, which is a well-received film, but he was criticized for his role within the movie. But by all accounts, he's excellent in Otto, and the movie itself is quite good. So I'm happy for Tom Hanks that he's got a winner here. Hopefully he can rack in more money next week with its expansion. Now, I want to leave you guys off with a few other quick notes that I didn't want to dedicate an entire topic to, but I thought were worth mentioning in the video. first off, Wakanda Forever is slated to hit Disney Plus on February 1st, so I would imagine now with that news coming out that people are going to stop flocking to the theaters to go see this. It's probably still going to make some money, but I would expect this movie to drop out of the top 5 next weekend. Next, I wanted to note that The Whale has now made $8.6 million off of just a budget of $3 million. Great for the small little movie. Happy for Brendan Fraser and Darren Aronofsky. And then last but not least, if you wanted to go see Babylon in a movie theater, I suggest you do it quick because it just started being taken out of movie theaters. It was withdrawn from 1,000 theaters this weekend. It's easy to see why. Its per screen average was just $600 on 2,300 screens this week, and it's a 3-hour movie with mixed reception. It's one of the biggest bombs of the year, only $13.5 million with a budget of $80 million, not including marketing and the theater's cut. So this movie is a major loss here for Damien Chazelle, which is unfortunate because I really love him as a director. But that's everything that I had to go over with this weekend's box office. Thank you guys so much for watching the video up to this point. Be sure to subscribe if you aren't already, and I'll see you next time.